transform the lives of countless other souls. What was in many ways distinctive about February 2013 was that when, without public warning, although many had expected that one day this might happen, Pope Benedict XVI announced his resignation, the Church was forced into a new situation which required something different. It could not simply fall back upon ancient and quasi-ancient protocols, rituals, or even realpolitik to determine its future, although many did fear that its main servant pastors would revert to doing so, and therefore divisive forces within the Church would be further entrenched long into the future. But February 2013 actually offered a new opportunity for the Church, however briefly, to take stock, to look around, to try and identify the real priorities for the Church in these times and into the future. And so, almost spontaneously, many individuals and groups throughout the Church around the globe began to voice their perspectives on what the Church for today and for the future most needed. Gradually, a number of bishops and not a few of the cardinals preparing to gather in conclave took soundings from the wider Church. This in itself was not distinctive. For example, one has only to go back to 1958 to see that the cardinals back then drew up what amounted to a job description for the new pope that the Church of those times most needed. In many ways, it was, in effect, a description of a pope who would take the opposite approach to his predecessor on so many important issues. It was certainly, in effect, a description of a pope who would lead in a very different, more open and engaging style, who would look out to the world and encourage dialogue with it rather than preaching down to it and turning the Church inwards upon itself. Many believe that in that 1958 conclave, only one cardinal fitted the bill for that job description. Regardless of whether one believes that he was appointed merely to keep the seat warm for the then Archbishop of Milan, who had been banished from the Roman Curia and thus far denied the red hat for his perceived progressive views, the Church back then of John the 23rd was undoubtedly receiving the Pope that it most needed at that time. John the 23rd's whole life in ministry had offered him a unique preparation for guiding the Church through troubled yet also exciting and opportune times. He did not disappoint. What he set in motion for the Church was nothing short of revolutionary, particularly the Second Vatican Council, which took place between 1962 and 65, arguably one of the greatest historical events in the entire history of the Church, and which sought to bring the Church up to date and to open the doors of engagement between the Church and the world. So Angelo Roncalli, who became John the 23rd, was the perfect man for a crisis. His career as a bishop secretary in an age of troubled Italian and ecclesial politics alike, as a seminary professor during the modernist crisis, as a Vatican diplomat to countries with a minority Catholic population, in a wartime mission, first in the Middle East, where he acted as a conduit for humanitarian aid on all sides, while channeling a special effort to rescue Jewish refugees from certain death, and onto a French society riven by internal scars and divisions as the war there came to a close, to the social, economic and ecclesiastical divides of the Patriarchate of Venice in post-war Veneto. In all of this, Roncalli took to these challenges with gusto and transcended the divisions in the service of getting the focus back on what was most important, enhancing human community and well-being, and overcoming what divides people. He achieved this by constantly stressing that what unites people is of far greater importance. But back to 2013, of course, the technological revolutions that have been visited upon the world in recent times made the scope of the global conversation about the next Supreme Pontiff unique in the history of the Church. Yes, even in the year 2005, and to a much lesser extent, even in 1978 and 1963, the eyes of the world were on the Sistine Chapel, and so many were venturing their own preferences and opinions. And yet, in 2013, as all too familiar factions jostled for preeminence and ultimately ecclesial power, something rather strange and unexpected happened. At the time, despite those global soundings which identified many priorities,